Welcome, race fans. This is the Grueling Truth Radio Network. I'm Alex Gray, and in here with me today is NASCAR Xfinity Series driver Tommy Joe Martins. Tommy, thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely, Alex. Thanks for having me.
All right. So first off, how was your Easter weekend?
Easter weekend was good. Got to spend some time with family, go back home to Mississippi and see them, and that's always a good time. That's something I don't get to do enough of during the season.
Well, definitely. So far into 2018, you had a 33rd place finish in Atlanta. You were 25th at Las Vegas, 27th at Phoenix, and 24th at Fontana. How do you think things are going so far in 2018, and what have you learned?
Really, that 33rd makes me mad. That 33rd is the one I look back at, and that was probably the fastest car we've had all year, and we finished the worst we did all year. So I look at BJ's team and the opportunity he's given me. There are goals that we have going into the year that might not be the sexiest goals. They might not be the win every race, lead every lap goals. Right. It's the win our race every time, and the people that we compete against back there in kind of the middle third of the field to the back third of the field, and we've been able to do that. We've had multiple top 25 finishes. We've had top 25 speed everywhere we've gone. And that, to me, tells me a lot about the team and their improvement over the offseason. So I like where we're headed. Sitting up there inside the top 30 in owners' points, that's a big deal. And so as long as we can just continue those top 25 finishes, keep it right there in that ballpark, get a couple top 20 runs at some tracks we feel like are good for us, I like where we're headed.
Yeah, definitely. Like, for example, I think it was the first Iowa race last year, you finished 11th.
Yeah, and that's those short tracks. That's something we're excited to get to, and I'll be back in the car. I'm not in Texas this weekend, but I'll be back in for Bristol next weekend and also Richmond. So back-to-back short tracks, and we really like our chance for a top 20 run there.
All right, certainly good to hear. So I'll ask you a quick question. What got you into racing, and what is your racing background?
So my racing background started a little later than most people. I got into go-karts when I was 16 or 17, and I just always been fascinated with racing. Loved it my whole life, and always knew that if I had an opportunity to do it, it might be something I was good at. Did not come from a racing family, did not come from a racing background. My dad and I just kind of learned as we went, and it turned into sports car racing and then late models, and eventually up into the NASCAR ranks when we started running our own team, which started as a part-time effort, tried to go full-time, didn't work. Went full-time, it worked, and then eventually it didn't work again there in the truck series, so we've kind of been back and forth a lot, but that's my racing background was start kind of in my late teens and racing ever since as much as I could.
Interesting. And you mentioned Martins Motorsports, your race team. So obviously, sadly, you had to shut the team down. What happened exactly?
It's just a lack of funding. We got to a certain point where we knew we could be a top 20 team every week, and to get to that next barrier, that top 15, that top 10 run, it was just going to take funding. And the way the truck series is set up, we couldn't go do that on our own, and we weren't prepared to go lose the amount of money that was going to be necessary to run it at the level we wanted to run it at. So there really wasn't a lot of choice, and it was the right decision, especially for my family. It was a tough decision. It was a sad decision because I felt like we had built the team up, especially towards the end of last year. Austin was driving for us. We had a couple top 15 runs, top 20 runs. We felt good about the direction we were headed, and it was unfortunate we had to pull the plug on it, but I also know there was really no other choice at the time. We had tried to get sponsorship. We had looked for funded drivers, and nothing really came through. And so we're heading into January. That's kind of the hiring season for a lot of teams that will kind of shut down over the winter and then start back up in preparation for Daytona right around the 1st of January. And we felt like it was fair to our guys to just let them know what we were doing, let them go kind of early there in January to where they could hopefully get another job in the industry if they chose to do that. So that was our decision-making process. It was just simply, you know what, we're not willing to spend the amount of money that it's going to take to get this thing going again here in the off season, and instead I was just going to focus on the opportunity that I have with BJ.
That is understood. Perhaps could it happen someday that Martins Motorsports may come back?
Well, we still have all the trucks. They're all still sitting there in our shop, and I haven't given up on the Truck Series. And in fact, this year and over the last few weeks, we've talked about running maybe a race or two or doing something, but it still comes back to the Truck Series gets paid the worst of the top 3 national series by a pretty significant margin, and to go out there and compete the right way, you're going to lose money. On the best day, you're going to lose money. So you still have to have a sponsor make up the difference, and you also have to have people to work on the car or the truck in that case. So
right.
that it's just not. It doesn't make sense until we can find the appropriate sponsorship that we need to move forward. Either that or try to do it for the long haul on a smaller budget, which we're just not prepared to do right now. I really want to focus on my driving career.
All right. So here's an interesting question here. You kind of, the way with your team and everything, you remind me of someone that, of course, was talked about this past weekend, Alan Kulwicki. He, of course, we lost him 25 years ago this weekend. Did you have any inspirations on him, or what did you think of him?
I look back on Alan now as such a pioneer, and that's been a guy that I've really championed that should have been in the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, and I guess I'll just keep tooting that horn until it happens. He's just so deserving of what he was able to accomplish at the highest level of our sport with the size team that he had, and basically being an engineer himself, and I think truly pioneering a lot of what we probably did with race car mechanics there in the late 90s and early 2000s, kind of the next step. To be compared to him, that is way too high a praise for me, because I could barely turn a wrench. And that's a guy that was basically his own crew chief in the cup level and also won a championship. So he's truly a remarkable guy that I think deserves every bit of credit that's being thrown his way. And it also speaks to a time, if you look back at Alan's career, and this is me just getting on my soapbox like I usually do, admittedly, but the sponsorship that was available there for Alan, a Hooters sponsorship for the entire season, it was just such a boom time for sponsorships there in the early 90s for NASCAR, where basically every car had the same decals on it every week for the entire season. And small teams like Alan's were able to secure primary funding and be able to go out and compete for a championship at the highest level. And I just think it really, when I think about Alan Kulwicki, I think about maybe a simpler time in racing that I would love to see the sport start heading back to slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that with like today, back then you say, yeah, Dale Earnhardt drove the GM Goodwrench car, Dale Jarrett drove the UPS car. Now it's, for example, you got Chase Elliott. He has Napa, Sun Energy, Hooters. I know Universe is on
Kelly Blue Book.
Yeah, it's got a lot of sponsors, and obviously it's just tougher nowadays. And you've been very vocal. I've been very intrigued by this. You've been very vocal about some problems with NASCAR's business model.
I think that there is a way to have the purse money cover teams' expenses to a certain point. Like, if you want to go spend $5 to $10 million on an Xfinity Series team, that's kind of your own prerogative. If you want to spend it and you have the money, I can't really stop you from spending it. But I think that there should be a model in place for all 3 of the top national series and the way that they distribute the prize money to allow teams to go out and at least cover their expenses and put a little bit of money back in their pocket without the need for sponsorship. Because I think that's going to open up the rides for the most talented drivers to always reach the highest level of our sport. Whereas right now that is absolutely, wholeheartedly not the case. In fact, most of the best drivers are stuck at their local track or in a local late model tour or the dirt track, and they just know that there's no way they're getting to that next level without bringing funding to the table on their own. And it's just a nearly impossible task to ask. And so I think if you put some power back in the owner's hands, allowed them to get to a point where their business model is not dependent on sponsorship. Like, yeah, sponsors would be great. It would allow them to do better and potentially invest more in the team. But at the same time, they don't have to have that to run a small team, be able to turn a profit, pay the driver, pay the crew well enough, be able to take care of all their bills, not worry if a car gets torn up because they got enough money to fix it. That's the type of stability that we're going to need moving forward. And with the television rights deal that's in place right now, you're talking about $800 million a year for the next 7 years that's getting split up. I mean, there has never been a time where this much money is in NASCAR. So for everybody that says that NASCAR is hurting, it most certainly is not hurting for money. We're not hurting for money. But I don't think that the model is set up correctly for a small team to be able to flourish. And that's the problem, is if a small team can't make it, well, then a big team is really just teetering on the edge, despite whatever we want to say. Because a big team is clearly overspending what their income is, right? So if they ever lose sponsorship, well, then their cliff is a lot sharper to fall off of. You see what I mean? Because they were relying on that sponsorship each and every year. And so that's what I've started seeing is bigger teams shutting down cars year after year after year, scaling back. And eventually those dominoes are going to fall where if the sponsorship money dries up, those big teams are going to cave a lot faster than the smaller ones. Like we're used to running on a budget, whereas they basically have established that they're not going to do that. They're either going to do it the absolute best possible way or they're just not going to go. Well, when that starts happening, that field is going to thin out really quickly. So I just think if you really want the field to be full, if you want there to be a good car count, a lot of people competing every race, you need to make this to where a guy can run a small team, make it profitable, know he can show up every week. Your field is always going to be full. Those big teams are going to come and go, but the middle of your field, the back of your field will always be full.
I can definitely see where you're coming from there, but, especially that, I've noticed that in the truck series, you saw Red Horse Racing shut down, Brad Keselowski shut his team down, and it has become a bit worrisome, and and I've definitely noticed that certain teams have cut back on cars, Roush used to have 5 cars in the Cup Series 10 years ago, and now they're down to the 2. So, yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. Do you have a vision or aspiration to drive in the Cup Series someday?
I got asked that on a podcast with Nate Ryan, excuse me, about a week ago now, where Nate asked me, what's the end goal? And, it's something I've talked about a lot, and I'm not sure. I know that where I'm at right now is kind of capped because I can't bring a tremendous amount of funding to the table. So am I ever going to get that premier ride to go win a race? No, not until I can bring something to the table or just a tremendous opportunity develops that maybe I'm not counting on here. But until then, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Do I want to race in Cup? Yeah, I think I've learned over the last year or so that I'm pretty good at this, and I feel confident that I can go out there and handle a Cup car and compete in that series. And it's just going to come down to the opportunities that are laid in front of me. And right now, BJ has given me a tremendous opportunity to go out and drive for his team. And it's allowed me to be able to keep my name out there and stay in front of those owners that are the decision makers, and potentially put myself in a place where the impression is I'm overachieving. I'm out driving the equipment a little bit. And when we're finishing inside the top 25 or the top 20, that is people notice that with what we have to work with. And that's what I'm going to keep striving for, is try to overachieve, and maybe that Cup opportunity develops. I think my overall dream in racing would be able to run in the Daytona 500. I mean, that's been my dream since I was a little kid. And I know what that's going to take. I know what it's going to take to get there, but that's it. All the things that I've been able to do have been so far beyond my dreams. I never would have imagined I'd be, almost a full-time driver in the Xfinity Series for an Xfinity Series team. No way in my life I would have thought that. So I'm already kind of, out kicking the coverage here. But getting to race in Cup and run a limited schedule or something small there, yeah, I think that would be kind of the cherry on top of the sundae.
Yeah, just definitely keep working at it, and I definitely think you're getting there. It's been fun watching you over the past couple of years.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Do you have a favorite track you like to race on?
Oh gosh, I mean Daytona's Daytona, right? I mean it's Daytona, and it has been very cruel to me. The last little stretch, I finished dead last in the Truck Series race there 2 years in a row, getting caught up in a wreck. So it's been mean to me, but it's still such a special place. Darlington is an amazing place that I wish every race fan could get to. Bristol was a place that I think initially I was a little intimidated by, and after this last race this past year, really fell in love with it. Just think it's awesome. Cannot wait to get back there next week. And also Talladega. I love restrictor plate racing. I think it's awesome. For small teams, it gives us an opportunity to finish in the top 5 or maybe win a race. And we don't get those kind of opportunities all the time. So those are the places that I really look forward to. Short tracks, speedways, Darlington, that is such a hard track. And I really just love the challenge of it.
Yeah, I always wanted to go to Darlington someday. I love the way the track is. It's narrow. It's too tough to tame, you know. I got the privilege to go to Bristol when I was a kid back in 2005. So, and I've walked up on the track with that banking. I can see why it can be intimidating. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Darlington is without a doubt the toughest place that we go. I can say that pretty safely. I have never been more worn out getting out of a race car than getting out of the car at Darlington. It is truly drains everything out of you.
Yeah, it does. Even when, even if I'm playing the video game, for instance, I mean, it's even tough then because you're like, I can't go under there like I can other tracks. So,
right.
Yeah. And overall, what has been, NASCAR in general, what has been your favorite moment that you've witnessed?
Oh, gosh, in my career, or are we talking just like overall in the history of NASCAR?
Overall.
Oh, man. Overall in the history of NASCAR, my favorite moment of all time? Gosh. Man, I still look back at that finish at Darlington as like one of my favorite moments. Just like of me just truly being just a race fan at the time and seeing Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch kind of battling it out there at the end of that race at Darlington. It's just, to me, that's everything that stock car racing should be in like a little 3-minute stretch. Like if I was trying to get somebody hooked on NASCAR, I would just play them that moment there. It's just everything we are rolled into one. And, I wish we could get back to a little bit more of that, beating and banging. And, you see those guys leaned all over each other and it's cars driving terrible and they're up there leading the race. So that, that's probably a better long-term thing for us, I mean, people want to see cars run into each other at 180 miles an hour. And right now we can do that, but we're probably just going to crash and tear a car up and it's done for the whole race. So as sensitive as the cars are now, it's just kind of an unrealistic thing to get back to, But I look at that Ricky Craven, Kurt Busch finish at Darlington, and that's still, every time I see that clip, I get excited. I watch it every time it pops up in front of me.
That's probably one of my favorite racing moments too, because like you said, that's just stock car racing at its finest right there. I mean, just a good old beating and banging for the win. Two guys that want to win. So.
And they both hit the fence. They both nearly wreck each other, and they are able to keep driving the whole way through it. So that's everything that I think we are as a sport.
And the great thing was at the end, I remember watching a highlight of that about a month ago. They just walked up, laughed, and shook hands.
That's it. That's the way it ought to be.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on here. Is there anyone you want to give a shout-out to, any sponsors you want to thank?
I just want to thank BJ for this opportunity that I've had and my family for continuing to support me the way they have in my racing career. And it's been a kind of a long, windy road that has led me to where I'm at now. So it's really just the whole year has been a blessing. We do have a sponsor at the Bristol race coming up, AAN Adjusters out of Knoxville, and they're hiring now. So if you're an adjuster and you're looking for a gig, that's the place to go. And also Gilreath Farms Black Angus is going to be on the car there at Bristol, and I'll be there at Food City Race Night hanging out with them and have a display car set up, and I'm excited for next weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. Well, good luck to you next weekend at Bristol, and good luck the rest of the season. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Alex. Thanks.
This is the Growing Truth Radio Network. This is Alex Gray, signing off.